All right, here we are on Thursday morning, 10 o'clock, ready to start Bible study. We're going to start with, Oh, How I Love Jesus. There is a name I love to hear, I love to sing its word. It sounds like music in my ear, the sweetest name on earth. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Because he first loved me. It tells me of a Savior's love who died to set me free. It tells me of his precious blood, the sinner's perfect plea. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Because he first loved me. It tells of one whose loving heart can feel my deepest woe, who each sorrow bears a part that none can bear below. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Oh, how I love Jesus. Because he first loved me. God, we thank you for this opportunity to open your word. We thank you for loving us so much. We ask that you would teach us and guide us and be with us in a special way by your Holy Spirit today. Amen. All right. Good to see you guys. Jay, Bob, Carol, and then Judy and Diane joining online. And see if we get any more folks as the clock continues to tick. Today is Veterans Day, so we say thank you, and we keep in prayer the families of those that are veteran supporters and loved ones. It's typically we have an acknowledgement of Veterans Day on a Sunday, and this year, because of the way the calendar fell, we had All Saints Day on the first Sunday, and we could have acknowledged Veterans Day this past Sunday, but figured let's separate the two and kind of highlight them. So we'll do that this coming Sunday. And hello, Diane. Good to see you joining us as well. Diane Richards. All right, so in November we have this Sunday, we have next Sunday, and then the Sunday after that is Thanksgiving. We won't meet then, but when we come back from Thanksgiving, we'll do an Advent or Christmas time study of the Scriptures. And so in the meantime, we've got this Thursday and next Thursday. Last week we looked at the book of Jonah, and surprisingly we went through the whole thing, and I guess it's just four maybe five chapters. And it's kind of short and sweet and to the point. You can do it in one sitting, and within an hour you can read it and discuss it and move to the next. So what I thought we would do today is this is one of, I mentioned, I think on Sunday, this is one of my favorite stories in the Scriptures, and that is the story of Joseph. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the book of Genesis. We're going to start in chapter 37, and we're going to read these chapters on the story of Joseph. And we'll see if there's anything in here. You know, so often when we open up a story in the Bible and read it again, you know, not for the first time, there's usually stuff will jump off the page, or there will be details that we didn't catch earlier. So we look forward to reading this. and seeing what it has for us. So if you've got your Bibles, or if you're joining with an online Bible, I like to use Bible Gateway. You can pick any English translation or other languages too, actually. I tend to go for Bible studies with the New Revised Standard Version, and we're going to be starting in chapter 37. Let's just say up to this point, we can see, if you look down in verse 2, it says Joseph being 17 years old. So we're going to start the story with him being 17. That is further along maturity-wise back in this time than it would be for us. You know, this is like he's a young adult, basically, at this point. He's not yet married. He doesn't have children. But that's where we're going to pick up. What has happened before, and there's several different chapters that provide the information, so I decided not to hunt around for that and just summarize it for you. But basically we have Jacob, who is Joseph's father. Jacob is the son of Isaac, and Isaac is the son of Abraham. So Jacob's grandfather would be Abraham. So it's relatively soon after the calling of Abraham, the promise of a great nation that would come from his family, Abraham's family. And then after, we see two instances where there's kind of this time in the story of the descendants of these men where there are choices that are being made between children as to who is favored. The first time we see something like this is with Adam and Eve's children. We see that God looked upon the sacrifice of Abel and he preferred it to the sacrifice that Cain made. And it's at that point that there is this dissension between brothers. So God chooses or favors one, the brothers don't get along, and then one ends up, well, in the case of Cain and Abel, Cain kills Abel.
Yeah.
That doesn't play out, fortunately, after Abraham, but we do have Isaac and Ishmael. So we have two different sons from one from Abraham's wife and one from the servant of his wife, which was a common practice back then. So we have these two sons. One is kind of the more legitimate than the other because of the marriage to Sarah. And so we have a favoring of Isaac over Ishmael. And then when we go to the story of Isaac's children, we have Jacob and we have Esau. So here again we have two, and again it is the younger, Jacob is the younger of Jacob and Esau that's favored over the older, and in this case his older brother is Esau. This is the story of Esau selling his inheritance for a bowl of porridge or whatever it was. He came back from a long hunt and he was just starving to death, and Jacob had some food and he's like, oh my God, I need some food, and he's like, well, I'll give you this food if you give me your birthright. And so that's where everything switched, and so Jacob is kind of known as being a conniving person.
Yeah.
And he does kind of get some sowing and reaping take place in his own life for being sneaky. For example, when he goes to look for a wife, he works for 7 years for the wife, and then when he goes to the wedding, he ends up getting married off to his betrothed's older sister, so he gets duped by his father-in-law, and then he has to work another 7 years for Rachel, the one that he was hoping for in the first place. All right, so this is the Jacob of the father of Joseph. So Jacob's still alive when we start this story. Jacob is married both to the sisters Leah and Rachel. And then Leah and Rachel both have handmaidens, just like Sarah had a handmaiden of Hagar. We have handmaidens of Leah and Rachel. So Joseph has children with all of his wives and their handmaidens, which I think technically are also his wives. So it is out of these 4 wives that the 12 tribes of Israel come. And some are going to be from Leah, some from Rachel, and then I don't remember the names of the other 2, Bilhah and Zilpah. We're going to see that a little bit later. Okay. So here again, we're not going to have 2 brothers with one being favored of the other, but what we are going to see is 12 brothers with one favored over all of them in the story of Joseph. Not to be too much of a spoiler, but that's kind of what's coming up there. We do see the scripture does tell us that Jacob favors Rachel, so this is his favorite wife out of the 4, and there are consequences for having a favorite that get played out in his life. And just before this story, Rachel's giving birth to the youngest of all the sons, Benjamin, and she dies in childbirth. So Jacob loses his favorite wife, and his youngest son, Benjamin, becomes kind of very special to him. And I think the name of Benjamin is something to do with sorrow. So that's kind of the context of the story that we'll start off with in chapter 37 of Genesis. And let's see the story unfold here. Jacob settled in the land where his father had lived as an alien, the land of Canaan. This is the story of the family of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report to them of them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph. Israel is the other name for Jacob. Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his children because he was the son of his old age, and he had made him a long robe with sleeves. Now we can see in the note here, traditional rendering is a coat of many colors, and the meaning of the Hebrew word is uncertain. So it's traditionally been translated as a robe with many colors or a coat with many colors. The New Revised Standard Version goes with a long robe with sleeves. Not quite as exciting as a coat of many colors. If you think about renaming the musical Joseph and the Technicolor robe with sleeves, it just doesn't make you want to go out and buy a ticket real fast, like the other one does. But when his brothers saw that their father had loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. I'm just imagining all the other brothers with robes that don't have sleeves, and they're like jealous because Joseph's the only one that has sleeves. It's something like that. I mean, it's going to be something ridiculous. I mean, if he has a lot of colors or no colors, or if he has sleeves or no sleeves.
Colors back in those days.
Oh, that would be a big deal,
There
probably.
weren't a lot of colors.
No. I mean, I would imagine whatever it takes to dye something and
very expensive.
Yeah. So
you
now, if it's just sleeves. So this is interesting because if you think about it, this is the task of the Bible translator. When the Bible translator takes the Hebrew or the Greek and tries to figure out what it means, they're going to come across words that they're like, we've never seen this word. We don't know what it means. So they're looking at the broader context of the story, and basically they're saying, okay, if he made him something that was so special that made all the other brothers jealous, what might this word mean? And so that's where they have to make the decision. If like we're saying here, if it would take dye and it was a lot more expensive, that would make the other brothers jealous. It's hard for us to imagine sleeves making other people jealous unless,
Well,
you know,
the part was that colors also back then represented talents or powers. In other words, that was the way you were. I remember just going by some of the old things that I would learn about up there. The powers. It's like Jesus had a white. In other words, you always see Jesus in white, which is the purity,
Right.
which is the white being the essence of every color. You know, being in it there. Robe of purple, in other words, which is the symbol of power.
right,
Joseph had many colors, and that means he was given many more talent, in other words, more talents.
right.
And that was the one thing, that's why I don't particularly care for the sleeves bit, because it kind of takes away what really was given him. In other words, the symbolism of he's been given more powers, which being the favorite,
Right.
he was given more privilege and power.
I mean, the only other way to think about it would be something like, they're going to be in a very hot, arid place, and you're going to want to have clothes that are appropriate to whatever that you're doing. Clothes could have this practical purpose, so you could make something that's like better in a practical sense than something else. When you see people in the Middle East, it's like we think hotter climate, less clothes, but it's actually at some point the other way around. Once it gets to a certain heat level, you actually want more clothes. I've experienced this in riding the motorcycle. A lot of times you'll see people without any sleeves. In the summertime, if you put something on with sleeves, it keeps the sun from like beating down on your skin, and you actually do. It feels that it's cooler. From mowing the grass or something, you wear a long sleeve. So, if from a practical standpoint, if Jacob went out of his way to provide this practical thing, then you would think, well, maybe he provided him something that he didn't provide for the other ones. They're like, fend for yourself. But it could also be like what you're saying, Jay, is that he also could have given him something that signified a social status or something about his talents, his character, his abilities, or his place within the tribe or whatever. If you think about the way clothes are used today, if somebody, like we wear ties. Now, ties are really annoying.
And useless.
Because they don't do anything. I mean, there's no practical reason. They look nice, right? And they have become something that looked nice for a particular culture. Not all cultures are into ties. But if somebody gives you this really nice, expensive tie and you're wearing it around, it makes this statement to the people around you. The same with if we think of a jacket. So if you think of like just the different types of sports coats or formal jackets, a suit jacket that people would wear, it's one thing to wear a regular jacket. If somebody comes with tails, you're like, either you're getting ready to direct some orchestra, Mr. Music Man, or you're like getting really, really fancy when the rest of us maybe are not getting fancy. So little things like that, sleeves, tails, these things can signify different things.
Except for the younger generations, the name on the clothes, it doesn't
Right.
matter what it looks like.
Right.
It's the name on it, but I mean,
You can wear a
I'm an old
pair.
guy that I've been, back in the 50s, actually the 40s, the 50s, you didn't go anywhere without a suit and tie. If you went anywhere,
yeah.
you wouldn't go to church, you
my
didn't
God.
go on a plane, you didn't go on a train,
Right.
you didn't go out in public, basically, as a man, without that, and a woman wouldn't go out without actually being all made up
Right.
and dressed. Now, I mean, you go to Walmart, you see a variety of everything, in other words. And, I mean, clothes are like nothing, they're disposable. Where back then, clothes, man,
Clothes make the man.
that was exactly it.
Yeah,
And you
to-
wouldn't go on an interview or go to see somebody of importance.
Right.
With
So
that,
they,
that's
they,
why church was
they-
very important that you wore.
right. It
you know-
played. It made a social statement.
Right.
By what you wore. And today, like you said, you can wear a pair of jeans that have holes all over the place,
And they're in
and
style.
they can be really expensive, and they can be like
What
out
the label
of
says.
the range of most people.
Yeah.
So you can wear these things that look ratty or whatever, but if it has
The
the
holes.
right name on it,
Holes.
then it's another social status
Yeah.
thing. All right, so it has to do with his talents, his social status. It has something to do with something that separates him from the rest, and it's from his father, and they knew it. So his father is showing everybody his favoritism. That's the thing that really ends up bothering them as we see the story unfold. So, verse 5. Once Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to my dream that I dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, and your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more because of his dreams and his words. Verse 9, he had another dream. He told it to his brothers, saying, "Look, I have had another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What kind of dream is this that you have had? Shall we indeed, I and your mother and your brothers, and bow to the ground before you?" So his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. All right, so we can see part of the character of Joseph coming out at this point. Whether he is ignorant or cocky, we're not really sure. Little of both, maybe.
Yeah.
Either he's not smart enough to realize how offensive it's going to be to tell these dreams, or he doesn't care.
And how much older his brothers were.
Right, he's the
He's 17, right?
next to his youngest brother Benjamin, who's still, I think, at home in the tents or whatever. They can't go out into the fields. He must be just old enough that he can go and help with the adults, with the men, and he's telling them already. I mean, the scripture said there at the beginning that it says he was a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. He was a helper. So his role is like a servant. His role is he's the help. and so he doesn't know his place, or he's cocky, or he's just ignorant. We don't know. It does the story doesn't tell us, but you can see how the dreams are escalating. So the first dream is just about the brothers. The second dream is also about the father and mother. So this is not just him saying, "I had a dream where I was superior to you, my brothers. I had a dream that I was superior to you, my brothers, and to my father and mother." And
Well,
it is
In
kind of
verse 11 there it says his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. So
Right.
Dad kind of kept in the back of his head like, oh, this kid's going places.
right.
And his brothers to be jealous.
Yeah, it doesn't say they hated him. It
No,
says they were jealous.
Yeah.
So he's not showing at this point we're not seeing, at least in the story, any particular talent or
No leadership.
or ability or resources or something that makes him above them to be jealous of them. The only thing that we see is the dream. So maybe they're just jealous that he's having dreams. That, you know, I mean, I've heard some. It's funny when my wife and I compare dreams. Hers are always these elaborate stories. They're always stories, and they're always people she knows, and there's some story that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And mine are just like very postmodern. They're just random, weird
Random thoughts and
stuff.
random actions.
Some people, some not people, some colors, some shapes, and weird stuff.
You wake up and you go like, what the heck was that all about?
Yeah. So apparently they envied him of his dreams, or who knows? They were jealous of him. Now this text, verse 11. Good morning, Paula. Good to see you. Glad you're joining us. The last one here says his father kept the matter in mind. This reminds me of what we see about Mary, the mother of Jesus. There's a scripture in the Gospels that says he grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. And then it says that Mary kept these things in her heart. So this is before he even starts his ministry. This is as he is. I think this actually comes right after he goes to the temple and he's teaching the elders of the temple or the teachers of the temple. So it's this. There is some similarity here where you have this younger person that would normally be in a position of learner or of helper, is rising above, in an abnormal sense, rising above those that he's under and teaching or guiding or doing something where the roles are kind of flipped or reversed.
Well, in this
We
case,
have a father in this story that he's kind of taking note.
Yeah.
Something's going on here. God is doing something. This story's going to, unfold in a certain way. And then we have Mary, when she sees Jesus doing this in the temple when he's 12 years old. This was probably some kind of a confirmation for her. She had these experiences of the divine nature of his birth, the things that happen in Bethlehem and in Egypt and all that when he's younger. And then for the books of the Bible that we have, it skips about a decade to him being 12 and going into the temple. And that's when it says that she recognizes, okay.
kind of an aha moment.
Yeah, the aha. So, we don't know. There are some other scriptures from places outside of the Bible that are stories of the boy Jesus doing things like bringing animals back to life or even creating animals. I think it's like a story of him breathing into a bird that had died and it came back to life or something. One of the later Gospels, but anyway, we have a parent figure that recognizes there's something going on here, and that should be an indication to us something is indeed going on. Verse 12. Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem, and Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." He answered, "Here I am." So he said to him, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring back word to me." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron. So just to kind of put ourselves into this place of, this is thousands of years ago. This is going to be if you have flocks of sheep or flocks of any type, you're going to look for that good grass and you're going to graze that for as long as you can graze it, and then you're going to move to other pastures to graze them as well. It seems like these are further away, so they would have been gone for days, weeks, or months at a time of, feeding these sheep from the. So Joseph is sent to go check on them because they're not going to have any word. Obviously they don't have their smartphones, and they don't have, they don't even have payphones where they can call up from Shechem and tell Dad how everything is going. So he's sending Joseph to them. He came to Shechem, and a man found him wandering in the fields. The man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I'm seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock." The man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They saw him from a distance, and before he came near to them, they conspired to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he delivered him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into the pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him, that he might rescue him out of the hands and restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the long robe with sleeves that he wore. They took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. So this is the plan. He finds his brothers. They see him coming, and they're like, "Okay, let's get rid of him." And Reuben is the one that comes to his rescue, and it says that Reuben's plan was just to come and set him free from the pit before he was killed. But we're going to see that doesn't work out the way that Reuben thought. Then they sat to eat, and looking up saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels carrying gum, balm, and resin on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." His brothers agreed. Then some Midianite traders passed by. He drew Joseph up, lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. Then they took Joseph to Egypt. Now, I guess in one sense you could say, well, it's better than death, but is it? To be sold into slavery? So we do see that it was Reuben's call. I guess earlier it says, "Shed no blood, throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hands on him." And then it says that he might rescue him out of their hands and restore him to his father. So that gives the indication that Reuben's plan was to just make him escape. But then later on, Reuben changes his mind and comes up with this great idea. And, maybe he thinks that it's kind of, it's not going to work out to set him free. So they sell him into slavery. Verse 29, when Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, I'm getting confused here. Oh, okay. It's actually Judah. Judah's the one that suggests him being sold into slavery. It's not Reuben. So Reuben returns to the pit, saw that Joseph was not in the pit, tore his clothes. He returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and where can I turn?" Then they took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, dipped the robe in blood. They had the long robe of sleeves taken to the father, and they said, "This we have found. See now whether it's your son's robe or not." He recognized it and said, "It's my son's robe. A wild animal has devoured him." Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces. Then Jacob tore his garments, put on sackcloth on his loins, and mourned for his son for many days. All his sons and all his daughters sought to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son mourning." Thus his father bewailed him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. All right.
You know, it's funny, in my version here, they don't mention sleeves at all.
Right.
They just go strictly with ornamented robe, many colors, beautiful. You'll just talk about the beauty of the robe, not the sleeves.
So if we look at the footnote here in the New Revised Standard Version, it says Genesis 37:3, traditional rendering, compare Greek, a coat of many colors, meaning of Hebrew uncertain. So this is what we have here, and when we're translating the Bible into English, we have sources to go to, and we don't have any original written documents of any of the books of the Bible.
Yeah.
What we have is we have copies of copies of copies. And for the Old Testament, what we have is the oldest copy that we have is a Greek copy, which is the Septuagint. And it's called Septuagint, which means 70, and that's because 70 scribes were the ones that translated it. So the Greeks, who were at the time those that were in power in the highest culture, they found the Hebrew Bible and they translated it into Greek. And then we have copies of that Septuagint that found its way around. We don't have the original Hebrew. So what happened later is people took the Greek and said, okay, if we picked this word, it probably was this. So now it's later on that the Hebrews had their own Hebrew version of the Septuagint. That's my understanding. So when you go back, what you're looking at the Greek version of the word, and then you're looking at the Hebrew version of the word. So the oldest Hebrew word that we have here, we don't know what the word means. The oldest Greek that we have is what we're using to translate it into many colors. So two different copies, a Greek and a Hebrew. One says colors and one we don't know what it means.
And like you said, they had 70 scribes transcribing it, so there's 70 versions right there.
Yeah, and I don't know if they did the whole thing 70 different times, or if it's like they divvied it up.
Yeah.
Like you take this book and you take this book, and
The zero effect.
so we don't have we don't know what the Hebrew word meant for that word. And that's I'll bring this up. This is another. This is just the example of the coat of many colors, right? And we can see as we're reading it, it's like I can tell you, I feel emotionally a little uncomfortable with that robe of long sleeves. It doesn't sit right. because I grew up, since I can remember, hearing the story of the many colors. I had the Bible story book with the pictures, and we had, you know, the things at church, and we had like art projects, and we were excited when the Technicolor Dream Cook came out, and so anyway, it becomes a part of the culture, and it becomes this powerful thing that in itself, when scholars look back and they're like, well, actually, if we look at the original story, it was translated into color, and then that became a big thing, but that may not have been really what it said. So it's at this point that people kind of make up their mind. Well, they're like, well, I don't care what the original said. I'm sticking with I like the many colors. Or people say, you know, oh, well, I guess you learn something new every day. Now, a similar issue happens with the prophecy of Jesus or the Messiah being born of a virgin. Because what you have in the book of Isaiah, the prophecy is, and a virgin will conceive and bear a son. That's the prophecy. That also is taken from the Greek translation of the word, and if you look at the Hebrew word, it doesn't necessarily mean virgin as in someone who's never had sexual relations. It simply means a young maiden. So what many scholars will say, and you'll see this also like in the New Revised Standard Version, if you look at that text from Isaiah, it's not going to say, and a virgin will conceive. It will say, and a young maiden will conceive.
Yeah.
So here's another thing where that traditional rendering of the word virgin becomes a whole big thing. I mean, the Virgin Mary, that's a pretty big deal. Just to say like, oh,
Maybe
in
not.
the original text, the original prophecy, it was a young woman shall have a child instead of a virgin will have a child. That's the difference between who Jesus' daddy is. It's like, is Joseph the daddy or is God the daddy? Kind of a thing. And technically that's something that you can unwrap. You can be like, well, it's not really God and Mary together having Jesus. It's just God. And yeah, that's a whole, maybe next week.
Well, maybe not.
But this is very interesting because what this shows us is how powerful an initial translation of a concept will give rise to a tradition that becomes so ingrained in us and gets passed down through generations that when later on people say, you know, actually when you look at the original story, it doesn't say many colors and it doesn't say virgin. It says some word that we don't know, and it says the same word that you use throughout the scripture that just means a young woman. And so again, a lot of people are like, I'm sticking with many colors and I'm sticking with the virgin and I'm not going to mess with it anymore. Or people can be like, well, I wonder what else is in there that we thought meant something that means apparently something else.
Well, the sleeves part doesn't really make much sense. I mean,
it doesn't, we don't see any more reason why they say they chose that.
Yeah.
There's probably some place, if we dug a little bit, we could, surely somebody's written some fancy paper on why robe with sleeves is a better. They stuck with robe or coat.
Yeah.
They stuck with that, but all right. I'm looking at 38, and this is the story of Tamar, which is a pretty dramatic and racy story, but it's not about Joseph, so I don't want us to get distracted here. So we're going to skip 38. And you're welcome to go back to that at some point if you would like to. it's a hard story to unpack because it is a story with rape involved, so that's never pleasant. So we skip 38, we're going to 39, and we're going to pick up. We see that Joseph is sold to Potiphar's house, so now we're picking up the story in Potiphar's house. 39, verse 1. Now Joseph was taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. He was in the house of his Egyptian master. The master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all he did to prosper in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him. He made him oversee of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he had him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and with him there he had no concern for anything but the food he ate. So here's where we start to see the dream starts to kind of play itself out. And we do see, whether it's the multicolored coat that showed some talents, we see he definitely has some talents. He has a gift and he has God's favor with him. And that's something that we see mentioned several times in a row. It says he was a successful man. It says that the Lord caused all he did to prosper in his hands. He found favor. And then it's like he has the Midas touch or something. It's like everything that he does just turns to gold and success. And can you imagine this in itself? This is just 6 verses, but that story of a young, whatever he is at this point, 17, 18, 19, a young man sold into slavery, is bought by this man Potiphar, this powerful man. Imagine the story from a slave. You buy a slave to help out of the house, and you end up turning your whole house over to this person. So that's not just talent. I mean, that's trust. Oh my gosh. He had to have this trustworthy and successful way about him for Potiphar to turn everything over. And it's a interesting phrase they use here to describe how successful he was. Potiphar had no concern but for the food he ate. All he had to worry about was whether he's going to have steak or fish for dinner. That's the only tough choice he had to make. Because all the other choices for everything else that he was in charge of, Joseph was doing it. So that's a story of this.
It's too bad they don't give some kind of a timeline on how long that took, because
I mean, it can't happen overnight. It's not going to happen in weeks or months. But yeah, it would be interesting.
You got to wonder,
think.
Was it 6 months? Was it 2 years?
Right. Was it 10 years?
Was it 10 years? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's still, it doesn't say he's older, but here's where the story takes a dramatic and racy twist.
Yep.
Now, Joseph was handsome and good looking. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to stop there. Now, if you're both handsome and good looking, you must have a lot going on.
Mine says Joseph was well built and handsome.
Ah, okay.
Which, I mean, hey, either one.
Handsome wasn't enough to describe it. And good looking just doesn't cut it. It's even more than that. After a time, his master's...
well favored in the
What is it?
well favored.
He was well favored. Okay. All right. He had a lot going
Well,
on.
you can
He
read a
was-
lot into that.
God's favor was on him. And after a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, with me here, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my hand. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then could I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not consent to lie with her, to lie beside her or to be with her. One day, however, when he went into the house to do his work, and while no one else was in the house, she caught hold of his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside, she called out to the members of her household and said, "See, my husband has brought among us a Hebrew to insult us. He came in to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And when he heard me raise my voice to cry out, he left his garment beside me and fled outside." Then she kept his garment by her until his master came home. And then she told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to insult me, but as soon as I raised my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled outside." All right. So dramatic twist. And what we see is this is a story about everything in the house being turned over to Joseph because he's so trustworthy, because he's so successful. And Joseph says, but Potiphar drew the line at, "I'm in charge of everything in this house except for you. You're off limits. Everything else I can do with whatever I see fit, but not with you." So what we see is that we see Joseph showing his trustworthiness. We show him standing his ground, setting the boundary, not being greedy, and still having kind of that servant mentality of, I do what I'm told to do, not whatever I want to do. Right. Even though he's being given the opportunity to do it. And so we see she doesn't like it. Potiphar's wife doesn't like it. Whether she is offended that she's getting turned down, whether she's offended that he won't do what she said. Maybe she thinks that she is over him, and she thinks that he's overstepping his role and not doing what he's told. Because under normal circumstances, if he's just coming into the house as a slave, if the master's wife, who's in charge of the house, tells you to do something, you do it no matter what it is. You don't have any choice, you're a slave. He had gotten to a point where his authority apparently goes even above the wife. So he's only second to Potiphar. And that could be, not so much, this could be about sex, but this could also be very much just about power. So if she saw that he was getting too much power, this would be a play that would get him out of the picture. And it does get him out of the picture.
And whether or not he went to bed with her or not, he was in trouble.
Yeah, he's between a rock and a hard place. I mean, the only thing that he could have done is, as soon as she said something, he could have run off and go tattletale to Potiphar. But
who's he going to believe?
Who's he going to believe?
Yeah.
Apparently, when she has a little bit more than my word against yours because she has the garment. And isn't it interesting that we have this garment again? So this isn't necessarily his garment of many colors or long sleeves or whatever, because that's a piece that was dipped in blood and torn up and
Was,
given
yeah.
back to the father.
Yeah.
So that's back, whether he kept it or buried it or whatever, that's back with the first part of the story. Now we have another garment part of the story. And this, it's like poor Joseph and his garments just getting him into trouble. I mean, if it weren't for the garment of many colors or long sleeves, then, you know, maybe that wouldn't have gotten that ball rolling, that Creed got all out of hand with the brothers, and the same with the garment with the wife. But if you look closely, both of those things are directly connected to power, because they signify power. They signify, I am above you. So he's above his brothers, he's above his parents, he's above everything in Potiphar's house, including the wife.
Well,
And so in both cases, he's betrayed by the people that find themselves to be inferior to him, that don't like it.
And the thing with the robe, I'm sure whatever robe he wore at that house was different than all the other robes of anybody else in the house, to show that, oh, by the way, I'm the boss.
Yeah, it's not like you know, when she goes and shows the robe to Potiphar, he knows
She knew instantly.
it's Joseph's. It's not like, oh, it's a you know,
where'd you get
it's
that
like a
from?
white polo shirt. Well, that could be anybody's white polo shirt. You know, it's like, no, this is Joseph's garment. So it's power, it's familiarity. You know, it's family with the brothers. It's the wife of his boss, not just boss. I mean, he lives there in that house. So it's this family power dynamic that people are jealous of, that people are fighting against, that turns into betrayal. And in both cases, we have this successful person that people are jealous of, that they just are trying to get rid of. All right, so she tells the story to Potiphar, and then verse 19, when his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, saying, this is the way your servant treated me. Notice it's your servant, it's not our servant. That man you brought into our house. Your servant treated me. He became enraged. Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined.
Whoa.
He remained there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the chief jailer. The chief jailer committed to Joseph's care all the prisoners who were in the prison, and whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The chief jailer paid no heed to anything that was in Joseph's care, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it prosper. So isn't this crazy? He does it again. He does the same thing again. He goes from, I'm a slave being sold into Potiphar's house, I turn everything successful, God is with me. And people turn over their authority. They give him all this authority. It happens again. In jail.
In jail of all
In
places.
jail.
Yeah.
So he goes to jail, so he's put in charge of all the prisoners. And he's put in charge of taking care of the prisoners. And he has God's favor again. So we can see that the dreams that he was having at the beginning really did
Paid off.
come to pass.
Yeah.
They really did play themselves out.
Well, no.
But we also see that we're reading a really quick version of this story. I mean, you could definitely turn this into like a series, a TV series, where you're devoting, years of his life to showing.
Season 10.
You could have a whole season of him working his way up the ranks in the jail system, or working his way up the ranks in Potiphar's house. Or
The other similarity was when he went to Potiphar. Potiphar turned everything over to him, and the only thing he had to worry about was whether he was having steak or fish tonight.
Yeah.
And the same thing here. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care. It's like, you're good.
Yeah.
What are we gonna have to eat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a good deal if you can find a servant that you are not paying anything to do all your job and you just sit there and take credit for it. I mean, it's a good deal.
I had that happen more or less. It was like I had sold this vehicle to a vehicle person. Didn't have the money at the time. I didn't know him really hardly from Adam, and he was working as a mechanic at this place, and I gave him. I was ready to go down south. I said, send me the money when you get it, here. And I gave him the address and all that. Well, all winter long, never got a dime. In other words, so I'm going back home. I'm upset. I'm going to repossess, take the vehicle. I come back. He hadn't moved or anything there. I went over to his house and I saw him, and he said, geez, I'm sorry, I lost your word to send this to. No one knew how to get a hold of you down here. But I got the car. My brother, who was in the service, gave him a brand new truck. Well, he bought a brand new truck, gave him his 2-year-old truck. The one I gave him was they were kind of, poor, they weren't very well off, He said, I fixed this truck all up for you, in other words, and he gave me a down payment on the car, and he said, just keep the money, in other words, I got the truck back better. I said, gee. Well, anyways, I asked him, I said, you do work on the side, blah, blah, blah. Make a long story short, my wife and I kind of adopted him and his family, believe it or not, because he had all these issues going on, in other words, where he had, like, big Great Dane dogs and 4 kids. And when he lost the pretty bill and chipped him out of his house, he was buying a house on a land contract and never paid the taxes. And anyways, he lost that. Try to find a place to rent when you got 4 kids and 2 Great Dane dogs.
Good luck with that.
Anyways, to make a long story short, he is now. We became there. We got him a house. We bought a house because we had some extra money. We bought a house. For there, gave him the house because they were living in. The only thing he could get was a little trailer with 4 kids. It was
With 2
awful.
dogs.
And we just couldn't handle that. And he was doing work for me, and I actually turned over the whole business pretty much over to him to run. Didn't have to think a thing about it. In other words, he's still.
Right.
But
you just had to
it
worry
just
whether you're
happens
going to eat steak or fish.
And this started off with, like I say, something that you wouldn't figure it out. It's
Trustworthy
these other guys. I relate to the guys that are, like the Potiphar there, and also the jailer. I said, I don't have to think about a thing. He's taking care of that for me.
That's funny. All right, let's wrap up with our song. Send us out in the power of your Spirit, Lord. May our lives bring Jesus to the world. May His thought and word bring glory to your name. Send us out in your Spirit, Lord, we pray. Send us out in the power of your Spirit, Lord. May our lives bring Jesus to the world. May His thought and word bring glory to your name. Send us out in your Spirit, Lord, we pray. All right, enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for joining in, everybody.